of your game, if nothing else. And I do think a lot of people try to underprice their game. I'm definitely a believer in if you have a decent sized game and a good game, you should be charging a little bit more. And I think for me, $14.99 is sort of the minimum price. And I suggest most people price their game ideally at $20. Obviously, if it has enough in it. And the reason for I think people aren't so keen on that sometimes I think people feel like their game doesn't deserve a higher price point. You know, I think a lot of people are quite, like modest, or maybe they have a little bit of imposter syndrome. So they sort of think, oh no, my game can't be worth
Sounds like me.
Yeah, and I would push back on that, because I think as long as it's sufficient, as long as it's not 1.5 or 2 hours long, as long as it gives you, a good amount of gameplay, I think people are very happy to pay that amount. And the great thing about that is you can use your discounts further down the road to entice even more people to play it. So if you do launch at $20 and maybe only 1,000 people buy it, that's fine, because a bunch more people are going to buy it when you do it 50% off in in a year or so. So I think if you can think of it like that, then I think, yeah, you do want to be a little bit more aggressive. I do think some people think their game will sell better at a lower price point, and my view on this is that actually that's not generally true, and you need to do the math. Like, would your game sell twice as many copies at $10 as $20? In general, I would say no. But obviously it depends how many copies you thought your game was going to sell in the first place. So yeah. And then finally, I feel like there's a link between price and quality in some people's minds. So I do think some people will see a $5 game and they'll be like, oh, well, they're only charging $5 for it. It must be like a little hobbyist project or something. Whereas if you do charge more, like luxury goods charge more, right? So I think it's reasonable to claim that you're a luxury good of your game, and so you should be a little bit, a little bit pricey with this. That's all the reasons I think you should be, you should be a bit more aggressive with your pricing.
Yeah, I agree on like the sweet spot on price, and I do think $5 games. Not sure like. I would hope that you can at least price it to $10. This is just a counterpoint, because I agree with you, but I've thought of these indie games that were like sub $10 prices, and they really like made an impact, that they almost went viral. And I think it was because it was an impulse buy. And that was kind of the logic I put behind the first tree, where I was like, okay, if it's like this, the beautiful kind of open world, colorful exploration game, and if it was just, I set it initially at $8, which I actually regret. I think it should have been $10 from the start. And I got that number. First of all, I did like survey my audience on Steam, and I did a bunch of forums. I was like, how much would you pay for this game if it was 2 hours? And you wouldn't believe the amount of responses I got that said, well, my rule of thumb is $1 per hour of gameplay, so I'd probably pay $3 for it. And I didn't agree with that. I was like, no, like I love short story-driven games, and I'll pay $20 for Firewatch. Like I'm happy to pay that for those kind of games that are shorter but good one-time experience. But yeah, I had the people telling me, oh, like maybe $5. And then I did see other developers, and the ones I'm thinking of, A Short Hike was $8. Yep. Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy was $8. And then there was another a 35 millimeter, which is like takes place in Russia. It's like a story-driven first-person adventure game, and that was $6 or $8. And they all did well. Like they had thousands of reviews, and that's what I was concerned about. I was like, I want the first tree to get momentum, and if it's an impulse buy, maybe that would help it do that. So I don't. And then one other thing is, there's another indie game I really like called A Mortician's Tale. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I know that game, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that game, and it was short and sweet. I think it was like an hour and a half long, and it was $15, like you were saying. And the review score tanked because it was just tons of people mad that it was an hour long for $15. So let me clarify this with you. Like, do you think to be $15, the game has to be at least 2 to 3 hours?
Yeah, probably. I mean, there's some exceptions. There's a game called Nuts. I don't know if you've seen this game.
Yeah, Nuts. Yeah.
That's a $20 game, and that is, I believe, only 2.5 hours long, because it was made originally for Apple Arcade, and it has very positive reviews.
Oh, yeah.
It has a decent amount, like the amount I would have expected for the game. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have expected to have have 1,000 reviews at $5 or something. So it's just a question of like, yeah, you have to work out. I do think, yeah, under 2 hours, it starts to get sketchy to put it over $10 probably. Yeah, I would agree with that. But I also think that like sometimes there's just a certain amount of people who would play your game. So and ultimately, if people would play your game when it's $5, that's great. Launch it at $15 and do a 66% off sale in a year and a half, and they can still pay $5 for it. That's sort of my challenge. But I would say for solo devs who are making more modest like itch style games, then maybe $8 to $10 is a better point. I tend to work with kind of like you know, a lot of the time I'm advising mid-sized publishers who've kind of got games that maybe they need to gross hundreds of thousands of dollars to break even. So at that point, I will always tend towards the $20 price point. But if it's more like a solo project and you just want people to see it, then yeah, maybe $6 to $10 is still fine. I still think if you have a decently long game, especially if it's replayable in some way, then edging it up towards $15 is good. I think Dicey Dungeons, which is a really good game, was cheaper than I thought, because that's hella replayable, and I can't remember how much you put it out for, but it's definitely a little bit cheaper than I would have. So.
Yeah, I think of Hollow Knight, how that was 15 hours, or it's $15, and I put 40 hours into it, and that game is a work of art. To me, that should have been $20, but I guess they just wanted to go for the reach. I don't know. It was such a good game, though.
Yeah, it's so difficult because you can't A/B test. You can't A/B test your game launch, right? You can't be like, well, if I'd just done this, then it would have been completely different. And I do worry sometimes people will price it more expensive and then the game doesn't sell, and then they will blame it on that. And I just have no way to disprove that. So that's why you have to be careful, I guess.
Yeah.